Methodology of teaching natural science. Approach, methods and techniques of teaching science, Part 2. Welcome to a class on teaching methods in science. In this session, we will be dealing with two teaching methods, namely Heuristic Method and Project Method. Heuristic Method. W. M. Rayburn says, "This method, as the name implies, is a method by which the pupil discovers things for himself or herself. The pupil is put in the position of a pioneer and he finds his way along the path of knowledge as did those who first discovered the facts, principles and laws which are now known to all." The word heuristic is derived from the Greek word heurisko, meaning I find out, and the heuristic method is one in which the pupils are left to find out things for themselves. Children are placed as far as possible in the position of discoverers, and instead of being told the facts, they are led to find out things for themselves. In this method, the pupils are made to learn. The heuristic method was for the first time coined by Dr. H. E. Armstrong. According to its author, Professor Armstrong, heuristic methods of teaching are methods which involve placing students as far as possible in the position of discoverers, methods which involve their finding out instead of being merely told about things. The aim of this method is to develop the scientific attitude and spirit in pupils. The spirit of inquiry prompts the pupils to learn. This method insists on truth, whose foundation is based on reason and personal experiences. Heuristic method aims at the pupil's own observations to satisfy as many questions as possible to be raised in the teaching learning situation. The heuristic method tends to set the learner himself or herself on the track of invention and to direct him or her into the paths in which the author has made his own discoveries. Heuristic method is learning by doing. Procedure of the method. The method requires the students to solve a number of problems experimentally. Each student is required to discover everything for himself or herself and is to be told nothing. The students are led to discover facts with the help of experiments, apparatus and books. In this method, the child behaves like a research scholar. In the stage-managed heuristic method, a problem sheet with minimum instructions is given to the student and he or she is required to perform the experiments concerning the problem in hand. They must follow the instructions and enter in their notebook an account of what they have done and results arrived at. They must also put down their conclusions as to the bearing which the result has on the problem in hand. In this way, they are led to reason from observation. Essentially, therefore, the heuristic method is intended to provide training in method. Knowledge is a secondary consideration altogether. This method is formative rather than informational. Principles underlying heuristic method. Principle of activity. The principle of logical thinking. The principle of proceeding from the known to the unknown. Principle of purposeful experiences. Principle of self-thinking and self-study. Role of the science teacher. For the heuristic method to be fruitful, the teacher should play the following role. The science teacher should help the student search for a suitable problem. Here the teacher should keep in mind the age, ability and level of the student along with the facilities available. The teacher should act as a guide and instructor to the students, providing them with sufficient background information and help to get students going. Detailed instruction sheets should be given to the students. The teacher should help in developing values and attitudes consistent with science by allowing freedom of thought and action. Arrangement for supplementing the students' knowledge should be made by the teacher, be it library facilities or field trips. A gifted teacher should help the students draw inferences from their experiments and observations. The teacher should also assist in relating these inferences to the body of knowledge they already have. The essential conditions for heuristic learning are freedom of action to the student, providing a responsive environment, acquire guidance of the science teacher when required, and encouragement to continue learning through heuristic method. Advantages of heuristic method. The method lays stress on individual practical work, careful observation and independent thinking, which makes a child self-reliant. It imparts knowledge of scientific method of thinking and inculcates scientific attitude among students. The heuristic method is based on the important psychological principle of learning by doing. Individual differences can be catered to as each student can work at their own pace. Students develop research skills including setting up and fitting apparatus, conducting experiments, habits of neatness and patiently attending to details are acquired. Disadvantages of heuristic method. This method is feasible only with a gifted teacher and a small class. Both these basic requisites are difficult to attain practically. Suitable textbooks are not available. It is very uneconomical in terms of time. The pressurized teacher will not be able to finish her syllabus in the given time. The stress is more on skills than on knowledge. Hence, the heuristic method could lead to an imbalance in learning as knowledge is of secondary consideration. As a lot of experimentation is done, it implies that suitable infrastructure is needed to follow this method. Hence, it can prove costly. The heuristic method demands too much of our students. Not all students can cope with this kind of learning. This method cannot be used for all classes. Practical problems like timetable can creep in, making this method not quite suitable for the school. Project method. The project is defined in Oxford's Advanced Learners Dictionary as a plan of action. It usually involves a task or problem calling for constructive thought or action, or both on the part of the student. According to Ballard, a project is a bit of real life that has been imparted into school. In the opinion of W. H. Kilpatrick, a project is a wholehearted, purposeful activity proceeding in a social environment. According to J. A. Stevenson, a project is a problematic act which is carried out to completion in its natural and immediate settings. The project method offers an approach to education which is consistent with the psychological principles of learning by doing and learning by living. The emphasis on science teaching should be one of inquiry and investigation. The project method is an ideal way of promoting creativity and the spirit of inquiry in students. Principles of the project method. Some of the basic principles of the project method are: purpose. The project should be purposeful. Every project chosen should be useful and practicable to the daily life of the pupil. There should be some set aims for each project, and the students should have a clear idea of what they do and why. Activity. The project should cater to the natural tendency of pupils to engage in activity. The teacher should allow them to think and plan independently, to exercise their judgment and to work out the project to the best of their ability. That is, the students should be made active both physically and mentally. Utility. The experience gained from the project should be useful. Activities undertaken must be completed, and the knowledge gained from them must lead to further acquisition of knowledge. Freedom. There should be full freedom of the students to work on their own accord. Project should grow out of students' own purpose and needs. Economical. The project should be economical, and the purpose of the project should be achieved without any waste of time, money or effort. Challenging. The project should be challenging. Psychologists have proved that students would prefer to do a task which requires a reasonable amount of effort. Feasibility. Feasibility. The project should be feasible. The considerations here are availability of material resources, laboratory facilities, access to libraries, time limit, and help from science teachers if needed. Steps involved in project method. This method involves the steps of scientific method: providing a problem, purposing, planning, executing, evaluating, recording. Providing a problem. The teacher should provide such situations to the students that may raise some suitable questions to which the students may be drawn. The teacher could provide these problems through libraries, laboratories, other science teachers, journals, field trips, etc. Purposing. In this important step, the nature and goal of the project is clearly determined and thus defines clearly the limits and scope of the project. The interest, aptitude and ability of the students have to be kept in mind. The points to be considered are the students' interest, degree of complexity of project, time allotted to finish the project, and availability of material resources. Planning. Planning involves looking around for the most appropriate and feasible set of activities to be executed. The teacher should be actively involved in this stage in order to guide the students to choose the most practical plan of action. The students should themselves do the planning with the teacher as a guide. Discussion may be held among students. After the discussion, the best of plans is agreed on. The planning is recorded in their project book. Executing. The teacher assigns work to the various group members according to their interests and abilities. Each member of the group should be actively involved in the execution of the project. In this step, the work assigned by the teacher to each group is further subdivided by the students among themselves, thus distributing the various activities and duties. The students collect information, visit various places, keep accounts and perform a variety of activities. Evaluating. The students along with the teacher review the project from time to time. This is to ensure that the objectives of the project have been met. Recording. The students keep a complete record of work, including the choice of the project, the planning methodology, the discussions held and duties assigned. Also, references and books consulted and readings taken, difficulties faced, guidance sought, etc. Format of a project report. Title. A brief title should do. If accuracy requires more than a few keywords, a subtitle may be considered. Abstract. This is a brief summary of the entire project, highlighting the objectives, methods used, and conclusions arrived at. Introduction. A description of the topic being studied, along with relevant background information, is given here. A clear statement of the purpose, scope, and the method of study should be included. Materials and methods. A description of the equipment, chemicals, methods, and procedures used and experiments performed is given. Observations. The recorded observations and data is noted under this section. Results. The findings from the study are given in detail in this section. Students can be taught to interpret their findings, comparing their results with other workers in the same field. Appendix. Students can insert any supplementary information in this section. Bibliography. A list of references is given to help other students follow up if they so wish. Types of projects. Smith has categorized science projects into the following types: model building, hobby projects, laboratory demonstrations directly from the textbook or laboratory manual, report and poster projects from literature research, example pesticides, investigative projects that involve the students in critical thinking and science processes like measuring, inferring, etc. Kilpatrick has classified projects on the basis of tasks involved. Practical tasks. In this type of project, the producer's type, emphasis is directed towards the actual construction of material object or article. Appreciation. In this type, the consumer's type, the objective is to obtain either direct or vicarious experiences such as reading or listening to stories. Problem solving. In this type, the problem type, the chief purpose is to solve a problem involving the intellectual processes. Mastery of a skill, knowledge. In this type, the drill type, the objective is to attain a certain degree of skill. Criteria of a good project. A project should be purposeful and complete in itself. It should be useful and practically applicable to the daily life of the students with clear, well-defined objectives. The learning experiences gained during the progress of the project should be useful. A good plan of action will facilitate fruitful learning activities for each member of the group. The project should be aimed at problem solving. The teacher should be vigilant during the choice of the problem, as it should be within the scope and ability level of students. The project should be feasible. The level of complexity of the project is of prime importance for its success or failure. Too simple a project does not prove much of a challenge to students, whereas too complex a project will put students off. The undertaking is complete in itself. The learning activity is lifelike, purposeful and natural. The learners plan and direct their own activity. Role of the teacher. Active involvement of teacher in every stage of project is inevitable. The teacher should assume the following role in accomplishment of project goals. Help students select projects according to their ability, interest and age level. At the planning stage, help allot activities according to the nature of the student. Be accessible to the students and be willing to help whenever necessary. Help in creating a democratic and friendly atmosphere in the classroom, promoting cooperation and harmony. Be alert enough to check whether the project is running along right lines. Help students in developing a scientific attitude and give training in scientific method. Suggest books for references and provide them with necessary information. Merits of project method. As students get proper freedom to execute the project in accordance with their interest and abilities, they get their psychological needs satisfied to considerable extent. This method is not only subject-centered, but due importance is being provided to the students also. Students are permitted to choose projects on their own, as a result of which they make use of their abilities to maximum possible extent. Through this method, students are provided with various opportunities by which they can satisfy their interests and desires. Habit of critical thinking gets developed among the students through this method. An urge to make use of scientific methods to solve various problems is also developed among the students. With this method, students get ample chances to develop coordination among their body and mind. Through this method, science teaching can be done with considerable success, as science is a practical subject and this method is also scientific and practical in nature. The selected project correlates with the real problems of life which students confront in their everyday life. Thus, they find it quite interesting to sort out such problems. Not only this, through the information gained, they become able to solve out their own life problems independently and effectively. This method helps in promoting social interaction and cooperation among the students, as they have to work in a group and have to interact with various persons for gathering information. As the student works with full agreement of the social needs, he gets molded in accordance with the social needs of the society in which he lives or exists. Thus, through this method, sense of social cooperation and responsibility get developed among the students, by which they can become responsible citizens in the future. As students gain knowledge directly through their own efforts, thus they acquire permanent kind of information which is retained by them for a long period of time. Mostly the projects are undertaken in classroom as classroom assignments, because of which load of homework from the students get reduced to considerable extent. Demerits of project method. This method takes a lot of time to plan and execute a single project. As the time available with the teacher is limited in the schools, they find it difficult to make use of this method in their class. It is not possible to design different projects for different topics, and it is also not possible to cover all the topics or content in a single project. Thus, this method becomes impractical in nature. For proper execution of a project, large number of financial resources is required, which is difficult to arrange. Such method can only be proved successful if the teacher is highly knowledgeable, alert, and exceptionally gifted. The responsibility of teacher becomes multifolded, as right from providing situations and opportunities for the selection of the project, the teacher provides the students with all the provisions by which they can execute the project successfully. Systematic and adequate learning is not provided by this method, as it is a method of incidental learning. Through this method, students learn only what is required by them in relation to the completion of the projects. Thus, through this process, it is not possible to treat the curricular areas in systematic and orderly manner. Generally, it is found that teachers do not possess much information regarding the manner in which this method should be used. Now, let us summarize this session. In this session, we have dealt with the heuristic method and project method of teaching science. We have discussed the general principles, characteristics, procedure, role of teacher, and the merits and demerits of the two methods. Now, here are some assignments for you to work on. List few topics that can deal with controversial science-related issues. Suggest suitable methods for teaching the same. List any two topics for a project work in science. Explain the various stages of project method with suitable illustrations. What are the essential conditions for heuristic learning? Compare the role of teacher in heuristic method with that of project method. Here are some books for further reference. Innovative Science Teaching by R. Mohan, 2007, published by Prentice Hall of India, New Delhi. Teaching of Science, S. K. Mangal, 1990, published by Arya Book Depot, New Delhi. Modern Science Teaching by R. C. Sharma, 2006, published by Dhanpat Rai Publishing Limited, New Delhi. Teaching of Science by A. Soni, 2008, published by Tandon Publication, Ludhiana. Educational Technology by P. Jain, 2007, published by Dominant Publishers and Distributors, New Delhi. Thank you for watching this program. See you again next time. Bye.